I think the smart contracts on Bitcoin is extremely important. Bitcoin lending is extremely important. There are several companies that are at the forefront of building some really interesting things around Bitcoin lending. So we don't feel like we need to be as conservative as we used to. And I think the most interesting stuff that's happening right now is
Guest today is Kevin Williams, bit of a Bitcoin maxi. Give us a brief intro in terms of like your journey in crypto. How did it start and how the heck did you land up here?
I've always kind of had an interest in Bitcoin, and everything kind of came to a head during the pandemic. So for me, that's kind of where everything started. And
Blockmates Orange is sponsored by Core Network, the ultimate Bitcoin-powered EVM-compatible blockchain. Learn more about Core at blockmates.com.
Okay, we're back. Another episode of a Blockmates Orange. Guest today is Kevin Williams, bit of a Bitcoin maxi, major investor in Bitcoin, has walked this path of crypto for a long time. I'll let him do an intro in terms of his journey. But yeah, Kevin, just great to have you on. Wanted to get like this investment perspective around Bitcoin, Bitcoin DeFi, and it's really cool to finally get you in the studio. Really appreciate it. Welcome, sir. Good to see you.
thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And yes, we've been trying to get this on the books for quite some time. So super excited to be here.
Just a quick word from today's sponsors, Corex. Corex is a decentralized exchange that integrates innovative social features and artificial intelligence, breaking the status quo of what trading looks like on a typical DEX. Corex transforms trading, which is often solitary, into a vibrant, community-driven experience. It allows traders to connect, share insights, and collaborate. Corex's AI capabilities serve as intelligent advisors providing real-time analytics, trend predictions, and personalized trading signals. Built on the core chain, CoreX emphasizes a commitment to Bitcoin alignment, decentralization, and security while simultaneously unlocking Bitcoin's much-needed utility. Visit corex.network and start trading now. Yeah, man. So, yeah, Kevin, just quickly kicking it off, give us a brief intro in terms of like your journey in crypto. How did it start and how the heck did you land up here?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, I can go as far back as I possibly can to one of my very close friends from when I was in high school. He was the co-creator and co-founder of Stacks, the Bitcoin Layer 2. And after we graduated high school, he went on to Princeton, did his undergraduate there, and he would come and visit where I went to school in DC. And I started hearing of kind of things around Bitcoin, decentralized systems, some really interesting things. Obviously, Stacks at that point wasn't a thing yet, but it kind of got me to always keep track of Stacks over the course of time. And I've always kind of had an interest in Bitcoin. At that time, Ethereum, et cetera, buying early on Gemini days, and everything kind of came to a head during the pandemic. During the pandemic, I was able to do a venture fellowship with a fund in Singapore, and that got me to really realize that I was looking at the charts way too often and way too long. And I was doing the venture fellowship. I wanted to find my way into the kind of Web3 investment space. And I always thought about Stacks because it's always been there in the back of my mind. So I had reached out to Trevor Owens, who's the general partner at the Bitcoin Frontier Fund, previously the Stacks Ventures, which was the ecosystem fund for the Bitcoin Layer 2 stacks. And he was hiring for an analyst at the time, and I was lucky enough for him to take a chance on me. So I joined April/May of 2022. The Bitcoin Frontier Fund is a fantastic kind of accelerator program. So I was really able to get my hands dirty working with founders at like the earliest stages of what we now call and consider the Bitcoin ecosystem. So for me, that's kind of where everything started. That's really my entry into the Bitcoin investment space. So during my 2 years of time there at the Bitcoin Frontier Fund, I grew from being an analyst to a deal partner to being an investment partner, where I really had the opportunity to learn, um, the IC process, the due diligence process, the deal docs and structuring of investments process, kind of really taking investments from A to Z. And then, of course, kind of the post investment process of actually working with the founders introducing them to other investors, helping them go to market, etc. So I felt like I had a really kind of good, solid base and foundation to catapult me into, my kind of the biggest risk in my career, so to speak, which was to leave the Bitcoin Frontier Fund and decide to go out, fundraise, and launch Sats Ventures. And I am extremely proud. It's been a hell of a ride, to be able to raise the capital, to go out there and talk to founders. Um, and I wouldn't change it for the world because I've learned so much in such a short amount of time. But I am so proud of the LPs that we have on board. I'm so proud of the founders that we've invested into. And this is still a very young and nascent space. And it's just exciting to see all the innovation that's currently happening.
So, I mean, you obviously had like really good kind of like a good introduction, obviously around Bitcoin from the Bitcoin Frontier Fund, and then obviously transitioning into your own, essentially your own shop. What were kind of like the motivations behind that? Was it just a case of I want to have my own business and I want to kind of like be the master of my own destiny, or was there something else that you saw as an inspiration for you to actually, okay, well, I see the gaps, I see the opportunities, and if that was the case, what were those opportunities at the time?
I would say it's more around timing and really considering the timing of the market, thinking of, okay, if I ever really wanted to go and launch a fund, what would be kind of the best timing? Because the Bitcoin ecosystem was really young. You had a lot of opportunities to kind of invest very early, and I think a lot of the companies that receive capital and that are going out to market over the last year are going to be some of the key critical players for years to come. So I thought if I was really going to do this, this was going to be a matter of kind of when, not if. And looking at the timing, I thought that it was the best time for me to go and try to launch Sats Ventures. Um, and I think us being able to get in early into some of these companies is going to set up, for the next few years as they're starting to grow and kind of level up from the super early stage, pre-seed, seeds, seed rounds, etc. So the thesis, I think, still remains very much intact. Bitcoin is the most decentralized, has the greatest liquidity, and yet is still in the nascent phases of its kind of innovation. And this is exactly where I want to be. And there are great founders in the space. More and more founders are coming to build on Bitcoin. And this is just an absolutely exciting time.
So, from a Bitcoin DeFi perspective, how do you see kind of like the next 3, 5, 10 years, just in terms of the growth of the industry? Like, is it a case of replicating what Ethereum did on the EVM side of things, or do you see things kind of playing out a little bit differently? I know that it's quite a tricky question to answer because there's so many different facets, from borrowing to lending, and how do you move liquidity around, and but I'm just curious as to like what the intrinsic vision is from Sats Ventures perspective, like on the macro view of what Bitcoin DeFi might look like from your perspective.
Yeah, again, I would consider a very small number of Bitcoin DeFi companies comparative to other chains like Ethereum at the moment. We have companies that are really trying to stay as close to kind of Bitcoin layer one, whether it be utilizing DLCs. And then we have the second, which would be an EVM compatible layer two, which they're kind of bringing existing applications from Ethereum, or they're forking code from Ethereum based applications and launching them on a Bitcoin layer two, so to speak. So we obviously have kind of these two camps, and then somewhat in the middle we have more or less like very what I consider traditional kind of Bitcoin lending um, businesses, something like Alava, which I consider to be a little bit more of a traditional business compared to a pure token based protocol that is strategically kind of focused around complete DeFi perspective. I think the most interesting stuff that's happening right now, from what I'm seeing, is around companies that are building infrastructure, but they're not presenting and pitching that infrastructure. They're not pitching themselves as a layer technically. They're actually presenting a front facing consumer application that's built
Yeah.
on top of the rails that they've created. So it's a little bit of a Trojan horse where many of the other layers, fantastic ones, Bob, Botanics, BitLayer, etc., are really focused on bringing a bunch of developers and applications to their ecosystem. We're now seeing a slight change where developers and builders are kind of focused on finding the product market fit with a particular use case, and they may be building a layer or some sort of mechanism underneath it that is powering everything. And I mean, we can look across all the different token standards, and there's tons. We've got runes, we've got ordinals, we've got a whole bunch. But I think the most interesting one right now, which not a lot of people are yet talking about, is Taproot assets. And this is something that I know we're going to talk about a little bit, but the announcement of USDT
Mm.
natively launching or will be launching on Lightning
Yes.
on the Taproot assets uh, is massive news that is being kind of severely discounted even today.
Mhm. So let's talk about it. You've opened the door. So let's walk in there and actually just look at primarily like Lightning Network. There's obviously a lot of opinion out there. That's I think it's very divided. I mean, you speak to some people, they think Lightning Network is amazing. I personally think from an infrastructure perspective, it is amazing, but from a delivery perspective, it seems like there's been some shortfalls. Why would USDT look at entering Lightning Network particularly? Is it because it's the only like true L2 in terms of how we define L2s? What is the dynamic that's going on there, and what are the potentials for exactly this? I mean, besides just USDT and stablecoins, what do you think we can expect from this dynamic?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I'm looking at this space, I think that there's a few things, right? One is it's kind of a legacy quote unquote layer, so to speak. It's something that has been battle tested for quite some time. That's the first thing. Second thing is that there is somewhat distribution in the sense that you have a lot of Lightning based wallets. You have centralized exchanges that are supporting Lightning, and you have businesses potentially that are accepting Lightning, right? So you have some of these kind of components. It's still early, and a lot of people might consider this to be uh, a quote unquote failure. I don't, because I truly believe that even some of this distribution channels that are already there, the problem has been that you are parting ways by actually utilizing your Bitcoin in transactions, where I think a lot of people would prefer to utilize their Bitcoin as collateral rather than the transaction method, right? So having USDT on Lightning, I think what that can do potentially is it can open up the door to some really cool lending protocols built on Lightning that would allow you to utilize your Bitcoin as collateral and maybe
Mhm.
actually make some of those payments using USDT instead of Bitcoin itself. This is just like a very high level thought process that I'm currently going through. But at the core of it, it's really the distribution. And I think the name of the game right now, you got all these layer twos, you got EVM compatible layer twos, SVM compatible layer twos, but yet Lightning has the existing distribution already there.
So if do you believe that if we get kind of like this transition into Lightning Network, that Lightning Network could almost be a bridge to sidechains and other L2s, or do you think that the industry is going to define itself as separate chains and entities that kind of like do their own thing? I almost get the feeling like there needs to be like a central point of kind of like it's not about centralization. It is like, well, what is the safest kind of like the safest ecosystem that can facilitate the transition between the L1, which is the Bitcoin network, and a true L2. So is it Lightning, or do you think that other side chains like Core, for example, or Stacks or Babylon or one of those can come in and facilitate that role? Or do you think it really is like this web of activity where it all happens dynamically between all those networks?
I think the original thesis has been, interoperability, right? Kind of
Yes.
obfuscating and abstracting away all the complexities between all the different chains. So much so that I think a lot of people are utilizing kind of DeFi rails in the background, but then trying to really not show all the intricacies of everything that's occurring. And I think that that's something that is going to happen, right? We might have multiple layers, but then we might have a significantly better user interface that allows you to make swaps interact between the different layers, but it's ultimately settling on Bitcoin. And I think one of the really good use cases that I've seen is some of the things that are happening on stacks with SBTC, just as an example, where they're really trying to find ways to kind of make it really more seamless between the BTC, SBTC, and then utilizing the SBTC in lending protocols or in swaps, etc. Um, so I think that's going to happen. It's not going to necessarily be one winner take all. I don't believe that that's going to be the case. But the reason why Lightning is just really exciting is, again, we have centralized exchanges that have already integrated Lightning. You have wallets that are Lightning supported wallets already out there. And you have this really great narrative on the forefront with Taproot assets. USDT, obviously, one, if not the biggest stablecoin in the market today, is going to natively support it. It's not bridge, it's natively supporting USDT on Lightning. Um, all the signs kind of point to Lightning making a very big resurgence. Whereas previously, I think everybody really specifically thought of Lightning as just pure payments. Right? If you bring
Yeah.
up Lightning, it's just pure payments. But Taproot Assets does change this narrative quite a bit. It's very early, obviously, but we're starting to see some really interesting companies and projects trying to get out ahead of this narrative and start building infrastructure that would enable others to kind of integrate SDKs, wallets that support Taproot assets, etc. So I don't know exactly when USDT is going to come, but the announcement was on January 31st, if I'm not wrong. And I have seen a lot more deal flow around Taproot assets, Bitcoin, and USDT on Lightning.
So, from a Sats Ventures perspective, and maybe there is hopefully a little bit of alpha in the answer to this question, what are you guys looking at as investment opportunity, if you are at liberty to discuss that at this point, from a Taproot assets perspective?
Yeah, so we have been speaking to a fantastic group of founders that is building a self-custodial uh, wallet that supports Taproot assets and also has an SDK that would enable BTC to USDT swaps. This company yesterday had also made an announcement with a partnership with one of the bigger dexes on Bitcoin already.
Okay.
I think this is something that is extremely exciting to us at Sats Ventures because we want to be at the forefront of this. Right? We see that there is a massive gaping hole in the infrastructure component, and we want to find the best founders who are equipped to be able to solve this. And we have a very, very strong thesis on this. And we believe that the founders that we have been speaking to will be able to be at the forefront of this.
Nice. I noticed you didn't give out any names, but maybe we can get them on the show at some point
I will
when
definitely
there
make
is.
the introduction.
Cool. I think, yeah, I mean, for me, this is like, it's this, the whole point of a Blockmates Orange is to go out and kind of like do this discovery, because I think the Bitcoin DeFi narrative, if you know, and then everybody else is kind of like ignoring it just to a huge degree. It's kind of like, well, we've just been completely decimated by memes, Ethereum sucking. There isn't really anything to look forward to, and obviously that's untrue. There's a lot to look forward to, and it's kind of like we've taken it as our responsibility to try and go out there and educate people around what's happening in this space. And I mean, obviously, you guys benefit down the line. I would hope so. But I think it's really important that we get the right people on the show to talk about this innovation, because right now, when I look at crypto in general, I'm not seeing this kind of stuff being covered to the extent that I think it should be. And it's a bit sad because, Bitcoin is the leader from a liquidity perspective, from a value perspective. And I almost feel like the industry is kind of like, I don't know, like holding itself back instead of taking note of this kind of stuff. So you guys are on the right track, and hopefully we can get these guys in as well to chat to us. I wanted to just interrogate like the founders in the Bitcoin space at the moment. Um, are you finding that the innovation is kind of like, okay, but let's just kind of like rewind a little bit. We had the US that was pretty much almost ostracized from crypto, and regulation really didn't afford opportunity in a favorable light in the US context. But now that's all changed. Has the innovation shifted back? I mean, I know it's been a short space of time, but has the innovation shifted back to the US? Was it always there, or has it been kind of like residing in Asia predominantly? How have you seen kind of like the founder landscape from a geographical perspective?
I would say at some point last year, when somebody asked me this question, I was leaning more towards the East, the Asian part of the world, kind of being
Yeah.
the innovator. I think now, after Trump took office, and the kind of dismantling of some of the like over regulation in crypto, we're starting to see a lot more companies be like US based entities. And this might not be like a true, 100%, these are all US based founders, but it does seem like pre Trump, a lot of founders were genuinely scared, right? They
Yes.
were like overly conservative with their decentralization structure of their entities. They were overly conservative with their like tokenomics sometimes, and I think it genuinely hurt a lot of companies, right? Especially companies that are building for the long term. Whereas those same companies that have already potentially launched a token, are doing quite well and growing their protocols, are now kind of, well, we don't feel like we need to be as conservative as we used to. And I think that's kind of having a rippling effect across the space, where I'm talking to more Asian founders who previously might have incorporated their businesses in Singapore or in Hong Kong, are now coming right off the gate, with we have a U.S. Delaware company.
Nice. Yeah.
Um, and I think wrapped up in all of this is also, there's a lot of amazing funds, investors that are US based. And I think a lot of times, a lot these founders want to make sure that they are kind of sitting eye level, right? Like from a perceptive kind of way, we're a US based company, right? And we're starting to see that this is kind of becoming important as the kind of crypto reserve conversations are happening, and we're seeing lists of tokens and blockchains that are US based, specifically US based, as the potential targets for this, you know, uh, reserve, so to speak. So I just think the landscape is changing. I think more people
Yeah.
are really interested in actually coming to New York. I've never seen more founders want to be in San Francisco than I have like in the last 2 to 3 weeks. Genuinely, everybody
Nice.
wants to be there. They want to communicate. They want to be in person with VCs. This is very, very different than what it was a year ago. So
Yeah.
I think US based companies, founders that are really looking to dedicate more time, whether it's in New York and San Francisco, this number is growing and it's severely outpacing companies that are being incorporated anywhere else in the world right now.
Amazing. That's great to hear. I mean, I remember even like less than a year ago, I was saying that if you're based in the US as a founder, you seriously got to start looking at leaving if the current kind of administration remains. I mean, we know a lot of founders that have moved out and gone to other places like Puerto Rico and, Singapore, and which is obviously a tragedy in the making. And it's great to see that that's no longer the case, and long may it continue. I wanted to just focus on, you guys as an investment firm, as a VC. You don't just throw a whole lot of money at people and kind of like let them do their own thing. You tend to take a more hands-on approach. What is the rationale around that, beyond just obviously wanting to make sure that the best is kind of like offered to founders? Is it just a general like passion for what it is that you guys are doing? Is it your experience in the space and the context that you have? Just speak us through kind of your thinking and how you guys approach, the investment process.
Yeah, absolutely. I I genuinely have a passion for working together with founders at the earliest stages possible. I think coming from this background of where I was a part of multiple cohorts of an accelerator where I am working together with founders on a daily basis for months, that has really carried with me um,
Mm,
through starting Sats Ventures. A lot of the investments that we make are extremely early. They're either in founders that have a conceptual idea of what they want to build, but haven't even incorporated a company yet, haven't written one line of code, or founders that have an existing MVP, a thought of what they wanted to build, but then working together very closely with them to actually see, what's really under the hood, what have they actually built, and how can their product be bigger than what it currently is. So for us, it's whatever time that we can have with the founder at the earliest phases, we feel very strongly that we can provide outsized value and outsized return compared to our check size at those early stages. So there are funds that just invest and maybe have
yeah.
fantastic names.
Yes.
For me, cash is one thing, but the greater thing is that I can be of some significant impact to these founders at the earliest stages and continue to provide impact once they've outgrown, their angel round, their pre-seed round, or whatever it is. I tell all the founders all the time, you know, we are your partners. Yes, we're investors, but we are your partners, and we want to be as involved as you will allow us to be. And it's important for us. We don't want to
Mm.
really just invest. We want to really work together with the founders.
What are you guys like right now, where we are in the market? What are you guys primarily looking for from an ideation perspective? Like you've mentioned a couple of things, but what is the main focus at the moment for you? Like what's kind of turning you on?
I I think the smart contracts on Bitcoin is extremely important. Bitcoin lending is extremely important. There is, if I were to look at my sticky notes over here, which you can't see right now, but there are several companies that are at the forefront of building some really interesting things around Bitcoin lending. Some are kind of focusing on the institutional aspect, and some are again focusing on how can we leverage Taproot assets, like I had mentioned before. So there's quite a lot of interesting things going on. They're not the same things like they were last year around the EVM layer twos. I think now everyone is looking for this product market fit, consumer facing product, or really trying to find ways to enable more programmability on Bitcoin. So these two sectors are still our biggest focuses.
What do you look for in a Bitcoin founder? Because from a content creation perspective, like we obviously see across the board, and you can almost like, I don't know, it's kind of like something that we obviously do when we do content and we speak about founders. Like, it's like, so do you think these founders are going to make it? Like, and there's definitely character traits, and it's not an indictment on them. It's kind of like, I mean, I know that it does sound like that, but it's like you just kind of get a feeling for like certain founders who just have it, and it's not about whether they're a great personality or whether they're great marketers, or but there's something about founders that are successful. What do you think those kind of like ingredients are that you completely identify with, and you like, okay, well, if I had to jot down a founder that's going to make it, these are the points that I look for.
Yeah. So one is you have to understand Bitcoin. That's like that's the first fundamental thing. You have to understand Bitcoin and you have to understand the mindset of Bitcoiners and how it is very different than the mindset of other people. And the second thing is you have to be technical enough to be able to explain your product, to be able to go into a conversation with an engineer as well as a potential developer, business partner, or whatever. And you can very eloquently, in a very short amount of time, explain what you're building.
Mm.
And the last thing, well, the last two things, one is you got to have a little bit of a dog in you. You gotta go out there and you gotta make things happen.
Yeah.
There's too many founders that are just way too nice,
Mm.
and it's not a bad thing to be nice, but in this space where everyone is vying for attention,
Mm.
you have to be aggressive.
Mm.
You have to be unapologetically aggressive many
Yeah.
times. And the last thing is I keep using this word, but it's really charisma. It's a not necessarily a science to see that this person has charisma or not, but
Mm.
can you actually hold a conversation? Can you maintain eye contact with someone? And that's why a lot of times it takes us some getting to know the founder to see if we can gauge that or not. Whether it's on in-person events, multiple video calls. But it's so important because you're not just having to sell yourself, your company, your vision, once. You're having to do this so many times, right? I mean, if we just look at one round, their pre-seed round, you're not raising from just one investor. You're raising
Mm.
from multiple investors. Then
Yep.
if you go into the from the pre-seed round to the seed round, and that seed round, you're raising from even more investors. So you have to have the want, the drive to make this happen. You have to have the charisma to be able to hold these conversations with people from different cultures, from different countries, different backgrounds. If you can do those things, I'm extremely interested. It's very hard to find these people,
Yeah.
especially when we are investing so super early and we
Mm.
many times don't have like a working product and traction to look off of. We're really gauging this. And some of the founders that we've backed at the earliest stages have been just absolute dogs. They are just going hard at going get TVL, building their product. They are absolutely resilient,
Yeah.
and they've done quite well so far.
Yeah, I mean it's quite an interesting combination, but what I've also found is that you might get someone who's like your typical kind of dev, who's like super introverted and like really knows the tech, but then struggles kind of with these kind of conversations. But I think what happens is that when it reaches a point where things start getting serious, and then they have those like serious conversations with someone like yourself, I've seen it a lot. I've seen like completely introverted, like very close people actually like realize, you know what, I can actually demonstrate my passion for what it is that I'm doing. I can still be who I am, but if I'm engaged with the passion of what I'm doing, I can actually pull it off. And I find that those founders land up being almost in a way more charismatic than someone who is more outward and more kind of like extrovert. I don't know if you've seen that before, but I've seen evolution in people. Like super shy. Like you meet them on the first round, and there's an interest to do this, and it's not quite this product. And then as soon as the product starts developing, they actually start developing as human beings as well, in terms of this game that needs to be played, in terms of what they need to say and how they need to say it. And then it just takes over, and then it's like they are the product. And I love seeing that. Very rare, but it's really cool when it does happen.
Yeah, I've definitely come across a few of those.
Yeah.
Really, really smart, kind of shy software engineers who are just absolutely, crack devs. And many times it kind of takes them finding uh, another co-founder that
Mm,
is able to kind of work on the business side of things to balance out
yeah.
each other, to make it work. There's
Mm,
one team that we invested into, um, that is kind of a very similar scenario, and this very strong dev has kind of grown like over the course of time, just like you said, right? I think very shy initially, but then over the course of time, like really opened up, and that company has blossomed. They will be announcing their pre-seed round quite soon. It's going to be absolutely fantastic. But this is why, like I said in the very beginning, like the technical component of it is really important, right? If you can sell me a vision, but you can't execute it, then there's no point. So, we always look for teams of two, pretty much. We try to find a really great two-man team. One person is obviously more of the business focused person. The second is more of a technical person, but also seeing, can they work together? Do they like each other?
yeah.
All
Yeah.
these
Yeah.
little nuances are like really important, especially at the earliest stages.
Yeah. So I mean, I think one of the things that I've found at the moment is that if we look at kind of like EVM and Ethereum based evaluations, like we see like insane valuations, whereas the Bitcoin projects at the moment super low. Like, is it because there's less attention? Is it because Bitcoin valuations are more realistic? What do you kind of like see in terms of that dynamic, and how do you guys navigate that in terms of your investments, and how you guys sit down with term sheets, and how you advise obviously founders off the back of that?
Yeah, I think valuations, in my experience, more often than not, kind of follows the market sentiment,
Mm,
and I think you'll see that with kind of fundraising announcements, fundraising rounds in general. It When we're in a very negative or poor market sentiment, it's obviously harder to raise. It's probably not worth it for you to go out there and try to raise if you already have raised previously. So I think a lot of the market sentiment stuff plays a lot into valuations in general. Right now, what we are seeing is very good valuations between 10 to 20 or 10 to 25 on
yes.
average for the very first round. Uh, Oftentimes, we, of course, when we send our term sheet, we want to make sure that we try to get between 1 to 3% ownership in the company. We've obviously written checks where we don't get to that level, but it is our target. So, we're writing anywhere between around 100 to 150 or 60K to really try to get to that 1 to 2% of ownership. And a lot of the valuations are really not so kind of comparing to Ethereum side of things, but more so I think this is the starting point. If you just talk to founders and you were to ask them, justify why you're valued at 10 million or 15 million, it's very different than Web 2, where you might have different models, right? Cash flow models, etc. It just the kind of aspect of Web 3 where I think 10 is a pretty standard kind of pre-seed round,
Yeah.
10 to 15. So yeah, we've been seeing 10 to 15, 20 to 25 pre-seed rounds. Again, for us as SaaS Ventures, we're really targeting the 1 to 3% for anywhere between 100 to 200K. And again, we're trying to focus on finding great founders at the earliest stages so that we can work very closely
Mm.
with them and support them.
Yeah, I think there's an advantage to that, as a project and as a founder, to find somebody who just doesn't just want to cut a check for you and let you do your own thing. I think it's a good fit if you are willing to kind of like open yourself up to criticism, to feedback, and all that kind of stuff. I mean, if you're open to that, I think it's just going to land up benefiting you in the long run as a founder. So yeah, hopefully someone who's out there who's got ideas listens to the pod and gives you guys a shout, because then they'll know what they're getting themselves into. And I think it's really cool that you guys do offer that. From a risk perspective, I mean, obviously with every investment there's risk. What do you guys see as being the main risks at the moment? Please state the most obvious to the not so obvious risks that kind of like fall in your boxes that you need to tick. I mean, obviously not delivering, obviously non-delivery is a major risk, but I mean, what else is there that you guys look out for?
Whew. Um, I think generally speaking, like market sentiment is a risk that's always on the board.
Mm,
Um, Another risk is, like you said, not being able to deliver on the initial vision. Um, Poor TGEs is another risk. Uh, I mean, this is a very risky space, right? Which is why we
yeah, it
kind
is.
of put a giant disclaimer every time that we say anything, because it's a
Yeah,
space that you run into meme coins in 1 second, and then you try to push everything back to kind of real value based projects. So when we're looking at a particular company, I guess I'll approach it from this way, right? When we're looking at a company through our due diligence process, we're looking at the founder first and foremost.
yeah,
What is the founder's background? Um, Trying to really truly understand what they've done in the past, how they've been involved in the ecosystems, go through reference checks. So talking to some of the other, people that they've worked with in the past, projects that they've been involved in. That's like the first thing. The second thing is, obviously, because we're investing so early, many times they don't have a fully fledged out product. We're really trying to walk through the initial phases of the product build with them, really trying to understand what is it exactly that you're trying to build. And then once we kind of figure that out, what's the plan for actually getting this thing audited? Obviously, that's a very big risk that we want to
yeah.
make sure when we're investing into a company that they have plans, or if they have already gotten kind of the first level of audit. But again, like I said, because we're investing so early, many times we're not even there yet. And then the last part is really around, I guess, like corporate structure and like corporate governance. We want to make sure that um, the corporate entity is structured correctly. The founders are all well incentivized. It's extremely
Mhm.
important that founders are well incentivized, that the IP of whatever that the founders are working on, that the company is sitting actually within the company. We don't want a situation where a founder is contributing to the company, but then that IP is not locked up in the entity that we've invested into. So there's just a ton of risks that obviously we're always looking at consistently. But it really honestly starts founder, entity, IP, and then moving down the line that way. Outside of the market cybersecurity stuff, this is how we look at every investment opportunity that comes across our table.
Nice, great answer, by the way. I think that provides a tremendous amount of insight into just the mechanics of the whole process, because we just kind of take for granted, okay, well, I want to do this project, I'm going to go and get the money, and I'm just going to get it done. But obviously, there's a lot more moving parts, and it's good
Yeah.
to get that perspective. I know that you have limited time, so I'm going to just wrap it up with one last question. Going to put you on the spot a little bit and ask you like what projects you guys are looking at, and I want you to name them, that you think have tremendous potential, and hopefully that also gives us a little bit more insight into kind of like the final broader vision of what you guys are looking at. And then I'm sure we'll reflect on this conversation in the future, because I definitely want to get you back on and I think we're going to do some interesting stuff in the future. So that's the last
Yeah.
question for you today, sir.
Okay.
On the spot.
My question back to you is, when is
Yes.
this going to be released?
So this will probably be released week after next. So in 2 weeks' time.
Okay. Oh man. Okay, I have again behind my computer here like our full deal flow pipeline. Um, one company um, is a company called Asigna.
Yes.
Um, it is the number one multi-sig on stacks as well as other Bitcoin layer twos. I've known the founder Vivin for about a year and a half, it feels like, to this point, and they have consistently been delivering. It's a product that I use on a personal level,
Nice.
and I'm extremely excited about Asigna. Um, there is a product that I think is quite possibly the most interesting thing out there, and we have not made an investment into this company. It's just through conversations and things that I'm seeing kind of where things are going. The AI agent space, it kind of went through this little bit of a seesaw in terms of we had a bunch of meme coin based AI agent
Yeah.
stuff. But if the thesis is actually that AI agents will at some point be really autonomous and
Absolutely.
they will be transacting with each other, what do you think the method of payment that they would want would be?
I think it's
Is
a
it
great question, but I think, yeah, I think it could be stablecoins, Bitcoin. I mean, I think it could be across the board in terms of preferred. I have no idea. I mean, does that come down to how they've learned things? If it's that, then probably Bitcoin. But then, yeah, I suppose Bitcoin, because that's probably the most widely used narrative around crypto in general, I would say.
right? It's probably the most widely adopted globally.
Correct.
Corporations, institutions,
Yeah, yeah.
companies, the liquidity that's on many other layer ones, a significant portion of that liquidity is some sort of
It is
abridged
Bitcoin, yeah.
Bitcoin.
Yeah. Mm.
Um, so from our initial conversations, there's a company called AISA, AISA, who is building the highway that would enable payments using
Two
Bitcoin
two
between
agents.
agents.
Yeah.
So that is extremely interesting. Um, Great founder,
Mm.
something that we're looking at as well.
So
That's two.
maybe you need to get him on the show, Kevin. Maybe we need to get him
So,
on the
so
show.
this is two, but I would be remiss if I don't shout out the current portfolio. Right?
Yes, please do.
Um,
Shill your
I
bags,
mean,
sir. Shill your bags.
there's tons of fantastic companies in the portfolio. Um, uh, Anybody who wants to see all the companies that we've invested into, all the founders that we've invested into, we have our portfolio on our website, satsventures.com.
Cool.
But there's just some really interesting things that are being built. A company like Glitter, who's really trying to find the best way to enable programmability on Bitcoin. It's extremely interesting. We have a
Mm.
company like Sats Terminal, who has built a fantastic kind of DEX aggregation engine for runes. These are just two, but
Mm.
even more recently, we invested into Lemon Drop, the Bitcoin Layers founders, who are looking to kind of meet all the Solana degens where they are by
Yes.
building kind of an on-chain acorns that would allow you to, stack Sats via a bridged version of Bitcoin on Solana. I mean, that's just the
Mm.
start, but these are the things that are really interesting because they're very different, right? They're very different. They're very innovative, and they're pushing the boundaries of really what can be
Yes.
done in these
Yeah, yeah.
particular categories.
Wow, great answer. Probably the best answer you've given us today, and it's obviously there's a lot there, and yeah, just a reminder to those of you who are listening and watching satsventures.com. We're going to get Kevin back on. I'm going to try and bend his rubber arm to come and do some co-hosting, bring some of these projects on and chat to them. And yeah, let's see how it goes. But I really enjoyed our chat. Kevin, I love your focused, serious approach. I think it's really, really cool that you guys are taking this whole space in Bitcoin DeFi by the scruff of the neck. I mean, that's what I sense. That's the vibe that I'm getting. It's kind of like you're interested, you're passionate, and it's amazing to see. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on, and it's been great to meet you. And yeah, we'll definitely continue with these discussions. And thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, guys, please like and subscribe. Go out there, share the content, tell people about what we're doing. We are spreading the message of Bitcoin DeFi. And yeah, see you guys next week. Appreciate it. Appreciate you all. Take it easy.
Quick one, nothing here is financial advice. It's for entertainment and educational purposes only. Always do your own research or speak to a financial advisor before making any investment decisions. Like and subscribe.